My name is Keith Ashton. I am one of the directors at a firm of architects and engineers and kind of doers and project managers called Space&Place. Those who know us, we've been around for about 45 years. You might know us as S&P. You'll heard quite a few times this morning people talking about space or places and places or spaces. Well, we just redefined what the S&P stood for about 10 years ago. I'm going to tell you a story, really, around one particular project, and like the whole life story, starting in about 1840-ish. This was referred to this morning by Liz as one of her examples, as one of her 3 examples. This was Exeter City Council building with us, designing and delivering it for them, something called St Sidwell's Point, and their mission was to build what's called a passive house building. But there's a whole kind of story that wraps around it. So I'm gonna kind of tell you that story. The first slide, it's always good to have slides with graphs on, and you've seen loads already. I can tell you this is the most important one you are going to see today. And the reason is because, and everyone's heard about this 1.5 degree stuff, and we've got to keep it within 1.5 degrees of what that means is the pre-industrial average temperature of the Earth, which was around about 15.8 degrees, which is kind of this line here. And then that's 0.5 degree more, 1 degree more, 1.5 degrees more. The good news is we keep it in line with our 1.5 degrees until 4 weeks ago. And 4 weeks ago, this is September, we went over 1.5 degrees. By the way, October, which we're currently in, might go higher. And on the 2nd of October, it was 35 degrees in Paris and 35 degrees in Sydney on the same day. That's pretty screwed. And we have to sort something out around this. So it's something that we have to do. We have to invest. Our industry, you've seen it before, you've seen it in various slides, our industry is a pretty big carbon user. But I don't misunderstand the fact that there's no point just saving carbon, right? We've got to save other stuff as well. We've got our social outcomes, we've got our strategic outcomes we need to meet, but at the same time, we've got to save some money. So we need a decarbonised, cheap, sports, leisure, community hub for the future. So here it is. The beauty is it'll be 80 degrees outside. We won't need a roof. We won't need air conditioning. We won't need any of Neil's stuff in there because we'll be achieving the same social outcomes, the same strategic outcomes. Why don't we have outcome-based commissioning? That will just sort a lot of this stuff out. The other thing is I meant to say, it was interesting to see Nick and Liz play off each other around budgets this morning. Nick, 250 million. Liz, within local government, spend about 900 million, about £1 billion. We at S&P, we do about 200 million a year. But there is, it's not really a competition because there's one winner in the room, and the one winner in the room is the NHS obesity budget, which is 6.5 billion per annum. 6.5 billion per annum. I was sat kind of there-ish about 3 weeks ago at NHS Estates Conference. And do you know how many, over 2 days, do you know how many times they mentioned our sector? 0. Never. Not once. Not once did we come into the NHS mindset around achieving on the social outcomes that the guys have been talking about. So, back to Exeter. We like to use this phrase quite a lot, actually, in that it's not an ordinary project. It was not complicated. It wasn't ordinary at all. But it kind of actually has to need to be in the future. It should be ordinary. Part of the way we're going to do that, and Rachel referred to it, is around what's the evidence, what's the empirical evidence which we use to make the decisions going forward. And actually, we are still, although the thing's been open a year and a half now, we still haven't got the data out of it, and I'll kind of explain why a bit later. So where did it all begin? It starts really on the back of those graphs, that graph you saw at the beginning, and the UN effectively waking up to this around the world, so saying that we need what's called the development goals, the UN development goals. There are 17 of all. There's about 3 or 4 of them which affect our industry, sports and leisure industry. We've all signed up to it. You know, we as a government signed up to it. Local authorities have all signed up to it. We're all on a mission. It's a kind of 2030-ish mission to do sustainable development, and carbon comes into that. Where are we in the UK? We have something called the Climate Change Act 2008. It's really quite interesting. It took us a wee while to get to the Climate Change Act. And rather bizarrely, everyone's read it, right? You know, everyone knows the Climate Change Act 2008. It got varied in 2019. But on the opening paragraph, on the opening page, it still talks about, literally the opening paragraph, it still talks about carrier bags. And it talks about encouraging activities, establishing trading schemes for the purpose of limiting greenhouse gas emissions. What that means is net. So you hear the phrase net zero carbon, net zero. Forget net. Net is greenwashing. Net is whitewashing, greenwashing, whatever you want to call it. We need zero. That's what we need to get to, zero. Not net zero, not buying a forest somewhere or planting we should be doing that anyway. You know, there's no point offsetting all your carbon, making more producing lots and lots of carbon, and thinking, oh, I'm planting a tree somewhere, so it's fine. No, forget it. Interestingly, so those who know the leisure industry, so we built K2 in Crawley about in 2005, very successful sports centre. In 2005, Greenpeace wrote a Climate Change Act. They drafted one for the government, and we kind of rejected it. We said, well, we didn't. The government at the time rejected it and said, no, we're not focused on climate change. So what happens in April 2016? The single most important document ever produced by humankind. It's the Paris Agreement. Okay, that is the document that limits everybody, and we've all signed up to it, to the 1.5 degree target, but absolute 2 degree on the graph at the beginning. That document, everything flows from. Literally everything flows from. So Exeter City Council, in their decision-making process, flowed from that document. Our government have what's called the Build Back Greener strategy. So that's our UK government adopted strategy. That flows into the national planning policy frameworks, which flows into a council's climate crises agreements, which flows into local planning, laws and policies. The challenge then is, what does it all mean? How do you do it? How do you actually do it? There's various bodies who have kind of written guidance on how you do it. So the one on the left is RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, which is what I am. It's they say one thing. UK Green Building Council say quite another. The Low Energy Transformation Initiative, they kind of say another, and they're all kind of moving around, going, "Oh, let's produce policy and guidance," but there's no clear thinking. I think it was Neil Bland said this morning. In terms of our industry, there is no guidance, nothing, zip, no guidance at all. We need to do it actually, and we need to work like people like us. People like Rachel, other kind of leisure consultants in the room, we need to get our evidence together so that the decisions that our clients are making, whether it's a refit or whether it's a new build, is based upon good data. It matters, okay? So this is the Cotswolds, this is Cotswold Council, this is their total energy or emissions over 2019 and 2020. Most of it, interestingly, is actually coming out of their waste fleet, which is half of it here. And then the rest is all their buildings. But if you look here, the gas of the leisure building, just the leisure buildings is 16%. and the electricity of the leisure buildings is 14%. So that's one council with one leisure centre, and that's the proportion of energy and carbon that they are producing. So we can make a difference. And to explain what carbon is, okay, there are three sorts of carbon. I'm just coming over here because I need a drink. Three sorts of carbon. There's the middle one is operational carbon. That's kind of obvious. It's in the in-use energy, you know, renewable energy, carbon offset. We should take that off, by the way, but carbon offsetting. So that's operational. There's the embedded carbon. That's when we build something in the first place, or we repair something, or we buy some new piece of kit, or whatever like that. And then there's the whole life carbon, which is effectively what happens when you get rid of it, you know, when you demolish it, when you renew it, when you do something new. So you have to measure all of these, and you can measure all of them, actually. There are ways, if we're designing a building for you, we can tell you to the gram how much carbon we're putting into that building and how much it should use. Obviously, the embodied carbon in the construction over the period of 60 years kind of stays the same. Embodied carbon in use goes up because you repair a pump, pump or whatever, you renew something, then operational carbon. So that's the whole of the carbon cycle. And actually, I'm going to skip that because time's a bit tight. There is an easy way to get rid of carbon, all right? A really easy way is that in the simplest way is and you would never do this, right? But if you replaced a gas boiler with an electric boiler, you've done it, you sorted. And then you buy your electricity from a decarbonised grid, you're carbon-free. But it will cost you a lot of cash to do that. Not the capital to buy the thing, but actually operationally it would cost you a lot. To heat that much water in a swimming pool costs about 7 times more with electricity than it does with gas. Think of it that way. Okay, so you've got to be way more efficient. And some of the stuff that Leisure Energy talked about this morning was around, how you make that more efficient. And that's a great, by the way, that's a great system for when you're looking at existing stock and how do you do you decarbonise existing stock? And we do a lot of that with the guys. But this story is just about a new build because in Exeter, it was a 50-year-old terrible building that we replaced. And there was all sorts of other reasons, strategic reasons, policy reasons, why we did what we did, why they wanted a new one. So what's actually happening towards 2050 is that, so we're around here-ish now, and this is the renewables graph, and everything else, you got hydrogen, coal, all of that's going to effectively reduce. But as the renewables goes up, everything goes down. So you effectively start to get this idea of a decarbonised grid, i.e. the electricity that's coming through the socket is not taking any carbon. And that's going to happen around about 2035-ish, okay? So our mission really is to make sure that we're buying off a decarbonised grid when we are, or generating our own power, solar panels, windmills, that sort of stuff. Because it's all very good saving all the carbon, but if you're paying an awful lot of money for your electricity, and remember, electricity prices will eventually vary. If you're paying through the nose on your meter, it's not going to work. So so the thinking is, the really simple thinking is you've reduced the amount of energy it's taking in the first place, the building is actually using. So it's one thing to change all the kit that's providing the energy or that's converting the energy into heat or light. But what the idea of Passive House is that you think about it, it's to reduce the actual load, to drive that right down. So that's the theory behind it, because if you drive that right down, that will drive the cost down. But the kind of problem that Exeter had and like every local authority's got this, so who are thinking of doing new stock or even changing existing stock, is along with all the stuff that the guys have spoken about today around other policy decisions, this is actually quite a difficult thing to do. The expertise in the room around the table is pretty light. When we did this with Exeter, it had never been done before. For clarity, there's 2 buildings in Germany which are very simple kind of insulated boxes with swimming pools in, and that is all that's ever been done. Exeter wanted us to do something that had never been done before, ever in the history, like literally on the planet. It had never been done. Everyone thought you're mad at some point, and one of their challenges was like, what does it mean? How do you get a badge? What's the certification process? What does good look like? Is it that route, that route, that route, that route? And there's lots. You will have heard of BREEAM and the Passive House you've heard of. There's a Well Building Institute. There's a Fitwell. There's American versions. There's European versions. There's Asian versions of all this sort of stuff. And actually, to choose which one of these that best fitted the Sustainable Development Goals was impossible because none of them do. None of them do. So if you take something like biodiversity, which comes out of the Sustainable Development Goals, so biodiversity is not in any of these. If you look at social value, it's not in any of these. If you look at transport, it's not in any of these. So there's no one system that anyone can go, I want one of those. I want a Keith Ashton certificate because he thinks about everything. That doesn't exist. So what we did, and it's really basic stuff, if you like, is we just compared the certificates that you could get, the badges that you could get, and then what the kind of CO2 savings were, what the CapEx, capital expenditure uplift was, and what that meant for renewables on site. And there's various, even in Passive House, there's a Classic, there's a Plus, there's a Premium. You can do different things. The Passive House Premium, by the way, it might as well be a power station because it's generating so much energy on its own. So they had to pick one, and we picked one, and we went through it with them, and we got involved with the Passive House Institute, by the way. There's a bit of a clue in the title. As Passive House, it's a German certification system. It's mainly if you're doing houses. So when we turn up to the PHI in Germany and say we want to do the world's first multi-zonal, huge leisure centre passive house, they went, well, that's interesting, because there's no certificate for that, because the way Passive House works is that all the KPIs are already set. So, because of a house, they know what the KPI of a kitchen should be, or of a house should be, or of the bedroom should be. Those sort of data points are already in existence. We were inventing something new, and it's one of the reasons why it's actually taken quite a long time to sort this out, because it's a bespoke model. And the theory going forward, so there are a number of ones out there in development. We're working on a couple. The theory of now of Passive House is to improve on the next one, okay? Improve on the last one, sorry, which comes back to my point of it. It shouldn't be an ordinary project. It should be, it's not an ordinary project, but it should be. So Exeter looked at these 3 things with the building. They said our our triple bottom line, if you like, was the climate, the biodiversity, and the well-being of people. And that could be easily transferred into kind of people, profit, and planet a little bit around what we did, why we did it. So we set ourselves KPIs within it. And then the most important thing for them was that there was absolutely no greenwashing within that. It was all going to be focused on the building itself, not on offsetting anywhere else. They had so Exeter, and it was a kind of arm's length development bit of Exeter City Council called Exeter City Living, and they had been responsible for actually quite a long time of building Passive House. This is a Passive House house that they had built. And all their Exeter have massive aspirations to be one of Britain's most energy efficient local authorities. So they had that kind of experience, but they knew that wasn't going to wash it. We perhaps weren't going to attract the right number of people through the front door if we were to adopt kind of normal passive house kind of principles of design. This is actually the very, very, very first passive house building ever, which was, it looks like an experiment, quite frankly. Not that it offends my architectural senses, because some of my colleagues are in the room, they would suggest that I have no architectural senses. The challenge was, how do you apply thinking to something where they wanted aspirations for something like this? That's actually inside Exeter City Council. So that kind of leap from doing something like that to like that was quite a challenge. Passive House were very helpful in terms of trying to work out what the KPI should be. Okay, what do I mean by KPIs? If you take a kind of square meter of this space, how much energy is the square meter of this space using? Would be a good example. And it's all fit. I mean, I bet you've all bought or sold a house over whatever, and you've got your energy certificate. You know, were you an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, or a G? Well, I mean, the reality is you can be. So this is the kind of watts per square meter, if you like. You can be in any of these ranges of D. You know, you can be up here, down here, but you're in a D. But like, why are you not in a C or a B? And it makes sense. Nothing made sense. If you actually dive into the detail of all this, it made no sense. If you looked at the current guidance out there of how do you actually agree, you know, to Rachel's point, how do you really get into the detail of the empirical evidence? Do you use CIBSPI? So this CIBSPI is like the engineer's guide to designing low energy buildings. Building regs, useless, unbelievably useless on this, like way behind the curve, so inaccurate, makes no sense. EPC I've just shown you, again, useless, makes no sense. Even Passive House, their planning package was great if you were building a house, rubbish if you're trying to build a leisure centre. Dynamic modelling gets kind of better, and then advanced dynamic modelling starting to get really exciting. And we had to get into some of this on the right-hand side to work out what our target was. So we took a whole bunch of leisure centres, typical leisure centres, taking Becky Adlington Swimming Centre. Becky was using, what was that, 700 kilowatt hours per metre square per year. And we actually set ourselves a pretty modest target against some of those averages of hitting. So the target was set by the PHI, the Passive House Institute. It's pretty modest, actually, but quite difficult to achieve because it was significantly different from kind of Part L, which is building control, or BREEAM, or anything like that. So what's Passive House? What is it? How would you best explain it? Think of it like a thermos flask. So think about if you pour something hot in the top of a thermos flask, it's going to stay hot. If you pour something cold in, it's going to stay cold. That's Exeter, 42 million quid's worth of Exeter. St Siddle's Point, that's it. That's how it works. However, they wanted it slightly more complicated than that. So you'll hear the phrase multi-zonal passive house. So each part of Exeter building, so this might be the gym, because it's got cold in. This might be the spa, because it's really hot. And then there's all sorts of other spaces in between. Okay, so there's multiple little flasks in our big flasks. We then suck and blow water and air and all sorts of energy, and energy generally, in and out of all these little thermos flasks. And we take them through a curly-whirly straw, and then we start to wrap all the curly-whirly straws together, and we exchange heat between one and the other. Not complicated at all. So so those clever in the room can work out that there is actually the pool, one of the pools. There are 3 pools there. That's one of the pools. This is the air handling ductwork for the pool and the changing room. It's unbelievably complicated. It's massively complicated, but it's massively impressive in what it's actually doing. And it's actually loads of AIs working it out, what to do where and what to move around. So a good example is there's no pool cover. There's no pool cover in there because if there are 3 pools, the big pool has no pool cover because we move all the hot, humid air from the whole of the building overnight into the pool hall, and it's so warm in there that there's no zero evaporation. The little pool, the little baby pool, we actually drain and put into we seal it underground in an insulated container. The whole pool gets drained and then pops back up in the morning. So there's lots of amazing stuff going on. There's the shower traps. Can't think where the shower traps are, but around here. When the water goes down the shower trap, if you think of it, if I'm having a shower, it's warm water going down the drain, literally going down the drain. That's the shower trap. We recover heat off the shower traps and then put the heat back into the pool. There are a couple of gas boilers in St Sidwell's Point. They've never fired up. They've never turned themselves on. The pool, this AI was learning the process. The first month of it was a nightmare. The water was running at about 36 degrees. You could boil a chicken in there, honestly, which is clearly too hot to swim in. It had to settle down. The system had to work out where to put the heat so that it could effectively put the right heat in the right place at the right time. Just on time. Do you want to do Q&A or do you want to do...
What do you want to do? That's the question, isn't it?
Or do you want me to...
Q&A at the end. What do you want?
What I'll do is I'll just move around a bit. If you go there, and that's the sports centre there, and at the same time we did a bus station. They wanted a passive house bus station, by the way. We thought it was completely nuts because the whole point of a bus station, the doors were opening all the time, so that was never going to work. But this bit here was to be a redeveloped site. It was the Crown Estate, actually. It was the Queen was going to build a retail park with us as we built the leisure centre, which is why when you look at the leisure centre on plan, you think, what happened to this bit here? You know, there's a bit missing. Because that was meant to be a retail centre which never got built. Inside, show you a couple of pictures for inside. If you go there, it's weird, all right? It's weird because it feels like no other sports centre you've ever been in. Genuinely, the water, so just the water, in the morning, you can go into the swimming pool, you can dip your cup into the swimming pool, and you can drink the water. The water is better quality than it's coming out of the tap because of the filtration system and the way we're moving, what we're doing to the water. The air quality, someone said before, open the window. The window's open. Hey, the window's actually open. You know, we can get fresh air in. There is more fresh air in that building because what we do is recover the heat of the old air as we push it out. It means we can get loads more fresh air in. What you do is you kind of zone it, like those zones effectively are like our flasks that we showed you before. You end up with very complicated building, so you try and reduce volumes, it's why it's steps, and we want loads of natural light as well, so that's another reason why it's steps. That was a model, this is the real life thing. Anyone notice something weird about this? Neil Bland's not allowed to answer. Come on. What have you... No solar panels? Yes, no solar panels. 0 solar panels. The reason is, like every local authority, they had a limit on their capital expenditure. The other thing is, we had no idea how many solar panels we were going to need. We'd modelled it to death, but we had no idea. And actually, a year and a half, it hasn't worked. It actually hasn't worked. It's been way too hot in there. The reason it's too hot in there, it was designed, and actually it was on Lizzie's slide, for 500,000 users in the first year. So it's designed to have 500,000 people like me with my heat and into the building. It's got 14,000 members. Wasn't planned to have 14,000 members. The trouble is that Exeter, unintended consequences, they priced it exactly the same as all their other leisure stock they have, and they did a shared membership scheme across all the centres, including the 40, 50-year-old ones. So it's a bloody nightmare. So, of course, everyone came to this one, and actually, that's why the pool started heating up to 35 degrees. So the point of it's ready to take solar panels, but we are waiting to know exactly how many solar panels it needs. Literally exactly, so we don't do any more or less. I won't do that one. I have slightly less time. I'm using less carbon, thankfully, because I had about 12 minutes less than I thought it was. But Exeter, I mean, I guess the story with Exeter is that they committed. They absolutely committed. That first bullet point, we need a strong, consistent political leadership, happened pretty well from day one, and that's quite unusual. I know we're going to share these slides so you can read the other ones, but that was kind of the most important thing. Now, everyone wants to know, the big question, what's the payback? What's the payback? It was designed for about, on the pricing strategy at the time, so energy pricing at the time, around a 10-year payback. The reality is we think it's going to be less. It's going to be about 6 years. But it's not ready yet. I mean, we are still getting the data out of it. And I'll give you an example. The amazing filtration system, it doesn't work properly. I mean, it's not quite, the computers are still working out how to do it. There's to save energy, it's a south-facing, so any lifeguards in the room, close your ears, south-facing pools, because that's the best way to get heat into the pool. But of course, that's causing effectively algae growth. You don't get algae growth, but effectively algae growth, which you have to deal with. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're still learning on. So we're pretty well sure we'll save about 50% water, and we'll save about 70% in energy, but we'll save 100% in carbon, 100%. Time. I'm going to give a couple of pictures of what it looks like inside. Now, it did open, it was meant to open a week before COVID, and of course, COVID put a stop to that. It's taken, even since that time, to get its actual certificate, because of all the kind of nuance and data collection and everything that's been going on. You'll see that the certificate came through on the 16th of the 10th, 2023, literally a few days ago. So and it's still got a long way to go on the data. And I think it's up to us as an industry to actually work hard with people like Sport England. Let's get Sport England to fund some data collection around these buildings. We're doing more of them. This is one in Enniskillen. This is an interesting one. 1 minute. Have we got 1 minute?
Yeah, keep going. No one's walked out yet. We're doing all right.
1 minute. So this is really interesting. So if we focus on just the sports centre and around carbon reduction, we get to something that looks like Exeter. Okay. But as everybody else has been talking about this morning around the idea of linking up, about us being a health delivery service, so a true health service, not letting the illness service, which is the current NHS doing health, but us doing health. The saving on carbon is mind-blowing. So you think about that 6.5 billion on obesity. You think about the carbon take for delivering 6.5 billion pounds worth of services within the NHS. So let's say we delivered it for £1 billion, another billion. Just give us another billion, double our budgets. The carbon saving is enormous as well. And this is one example, although it's not quite going to happen like this annoyingly. This is up in Bradford, 20 million of funding from Luff, 3 NHS trusts, 7 local authority services within it, completely integrated. Trying to get everybody aligned is almost impossible. I don't think it's going to happen. But in quite the same way that it is. But it's not a new idea. So this is now your homework, all right? We all know who this guy is, Nye Bevan, founder of the NHS, and that's Sylvia Diggory, trouble with Sylvia, she was ill. So Nye Bevan thought, what a great idea, let's look after ill people and fix them. And he looked at a few models. You know, he actually looked at a few models pre-war around what it should look like. And one he looked at was two doctors called Dr. Pierce and Dr. George Scott Williamson. And if you don't know this, this is your homework, all right? Because this is an amazing model. They developed something called the Pioneer Health Centre. So it's the Peckham experiment, effectively. And what they did was a kind of social experiment around social integration, community activity, family activity, gardening, cooking, dancing, swimming, everything like that. It was amazing. It truly, truly was the way to have a proper, true health service, which is what we all are in this room. But the problem is that Dr. Pierce and Dr. Williamson were biologists, and in Germany at the same time, there's some pretty rubbish stuff going on with biologists and the kind of Aryan race. So Nye Bevan went back into Parliament and said, we can't do this model. We can't do it. It's run by biologists. We have to use the illness model, and that's why we have what we have today. That's why it's 6.5 billion for their obesity budget, and we're not looking after it because of bloody Hitler. So that's your homework. Look it up. It's on Google. It's on YouTube. It's amazing. We're in the other room. This is Doris. This is our stand. I know we're architects, but we are absolutely, like everyone else has been saying, we're absolutely focused on the people. About 100 million people use our buildings every year, so it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of ability to nudge, but we need all of us together to get that right nudge. That's me in digital format on the right. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.